Unfortunately, disinformation is now endemic in elections around the world. It's not a question of if disinformation will occur, it's just at what volume and what particular actors are behind it. The best way to prepare is to have organizations in place and experts who can identify and track it. Who can especially identify when there's an inauthentic campaign, when there's an instance of information manipulation, where a small group of people, maybe a small group of people outside the country, are trying to create the sense that there's a groundswell of opinion within the country, when that's not actually the case. But I also want to note that something that we should always be on guard against is claims of disinformation when it is in fact legitimate political expression within a country. It is unfortunately easy to overreact in these cases, just as we see disinformation posing a more and more profound challenge. Well, as much as possible, is the content verifiable? Are there multiple sources that say the same thing? In some cases, though, it's not possible to determine from content alone whether there's a disinformation campaign. And that's when you look beyond the message being spread to the way that it's being spread and shared. How is it originating on different social media platforms or in the public media? What sorts of people are expressing it? And is there evidence, for instance, of inauthentic activity surrounding it? These are things that help us make an attribution of a disinformation campaign, but of course doing so is time involved and very difficult, especially during an election season. So my greatest sympathy. So I can speak here from the American experience because prior to our 2020 election under President Trump, he was famous for spreading disinformation and using his government office to do so. And in fact, what he would do would the tactic is referred to as flooding the zone. He would spread many different narratives, so many that it was not possible for fact checkers to invest the effort to repudiate them and then have that repudiation reach an appropriate audience. From our experience, my best advice is to try to find those stories which seem to pose the most imminent harm. In the case of the United States, it was disinformation around our voting processes. There were people who were spreading messages about the wrong time to show up to vote, who were mischaracterizing very basic facts about democratic participation, then very basic facts about the legitimacy of our election. Our journalists ultimately focused on those claims, even as they unfortunately had to let many more go. But that's the best method that I've found from our American experience. So I think the Macedonians who did aid misinformation campaigns around Trump in 2015, that they created a body of expertise that could be used in domestic Macedonian politics now. However, it's also important to note that those Macedonians were not ideologically driven. They saw an opportunity to make quite a lot of money off of fairly gullible Americans. And although what they were doing was wrong, I also am a little bit sympathetic to them because they saw an opportunity and they seized it. But of course, that's not the way that one should act in a democratic society, and particularly when it's your own country, not the sort of behavior you should engage in. The challenge is that when you create a body of expertise, as is the case in Macedonia, that those experts then want to use those talents elsewhere to make a quick buck. So I think that is one of the challenges that Macedonia is facing. But of course, here it's not just Macedonia. We see, for instance, troll farms in Mexico or large influence operations out of the Philippines where they build this body of expertise and knowledge, and now they're trying to sell their skills elsewhere or sell their skills to different political actors within their native countries.